Yo everybody, this is Kyle, and this is not an iPhone XS or XS Max. Apple released the iPhone XS and XS Max just a little bit ago, and I really wanted to get one. The cameras were amazing, but I couldn't quite justify it. I still love my iPhone X, and I want to show you a couple of apps that are keeping me from that fear of missing out on the new phone. The new camera is amazing. The new HDR features are great, get higher dynamic range, and the video looks amazing. The frame rates are the same, so that's what really kept me from upgrading. I think probably next year, whatever comes out, I'll probably jump on that. But I do have a couple of applications that help me maximize what I can do with my iPhone's camera. The first two are ProCam and Halide. These apps are great because they let me shoot in a RAW format. I get a DNG file that I can maximize what I get from my camera. You'll see I can hit the RAW button in the top left-hand corner. I can toggle between my wide-angle camera and my close-up camera, and I can adjust my auto exposure and my white balance, my focus. It's all there. It's great. And when I edit it in VSCO, Lightroom, I get the full spectrum of color and exposure control. It's really, really great. I personally use ProCam a little bit more than Halide. Halide is great. And actually, if you have an iPhone XS or XS Max, Halide is great. It has a new RAW function, is specifically tuned for the iPhone X and XS Max. I've heard really good things. So those are my first apps. You can also shoot RAW in Lightroom. I've just given up on Adobe. I don't pay for Creative Cloud anymore, so I don't really use Lightroom Mobile. The next app is Focus. One of my favorite things about the iPhone XS and XS Max was that in portrait mode, you could change the depth of field in the editing tab of the Photos app. Focus gives me a lot of the same control as the native Photos app in the iPhone XS Max. Right inside of this app in the iPhone X. Also works on the iPhone 8 and 7 as well. I can change the depth of field. I can make it more closed down, mimicking a closed down aperture. I can mimic a more open aperture. I can also do things that the iPhone XS Max and XS can't do natively. I can change the shape of the bokeh. I can imitate a lens with more or fewer blades in the aperture. I can put like a novelty cutout, as when you put the cutout in front of the lens, like a heart or something. I do this often in the winter time with my holiday trees. Little Apple logo. So that's really, really cool. The last thing I really, really like about this app is it can mimic classic lenses. The Helios 44 is a classic lens, and it can blur the bokeh just like that lens. It's very, very cool. Gives it a very nice feel. Some other things, you can do some computational lighting. You can add a new light to your scene and move where that light is, and it kind of uses the 3D depth map to place the light. It's very, very interesting. I don't use it that much, but it's something you can do. You can also fix how deep your depth map is. You can't change the depth map. Once the depth map is set, you can't remap it. But you can, if there's too much front bokeh, you can kind of get more of the front in focus. You can get more of the selection, so you can kind of fix your depth map. You can't remap it, but you can get some fixes in there if too much is cut out of focus. All right, so that's Focus, great app. And then of course with video, there is the ever popular Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro is my favorite app for recording video in my iPhone X. I did pay for the app, and then I also paid for the upgrade that gives me a logarithmic format, or just a more flat format. The flatter the image, the less contrasty and less saturated it is, the more dynamic range it perceives to capture. And then in post-production, you can recolor your footage. So is it giving my camera more dynamic range? No, the camera still has the same amount of dynamic range than it did before, but now I have access to all of it in post-production. I can push and pull it a little bit better. I don't use the logarithmic curve in Filmic Pro. That's just a little too flat. It goes a little too far for me. It's only an 8-bit codec, so there's not a huge depth in the gradient of colors, and it's a little noisy because I'm indoors right now. But the flat curve is great. It gives me just a little bit more push and pull than just the natural curve does. Dynamic, if you don't have time to color correct or grade iPhone footage, dynamic looks great. It's technically a little bit less dynamic range, but it really makes colors and stuff pop. The other thing I really like about Filmic Pro is it will let me disable the stabilization of the iPhone camera, which is great. I can disable that, put it on a gimbal, and get it a little bit smoother than it would be with the stabilization on. Sometimes you can get those little micro jitters of the stabilization in the phone fighting the stabilization of the gimbal. So this is really nice. So right now it's super jittery because I'm just hand holding it, but if I were to put it on a stabilizer, it'd look pretty good. All right, everybody, those are my apps, ProCam, Halide, Focus, and Filmic Pro, that are helping me not miss an iPhone XS so much and hopefully squeeze another year out of my iPhone X. And hopefully we'll see some really drastic improvements in the iPhone camera and just iPhone technology next year. All right, that's it for me. I'll see you next time. Bye.